deal with this history thing. I hear a lot of people, and you see a lot of people, like I said, love to talk about the kings and queens that black people were back in the day and all this good stuff, and that's great. But what I want black advocates to do, the task I'm going to give you, is I need you to do the same type of research that white folks are trying to find out about you. I want you to start a journal, a notebook, whatever you choose to do about your timeline, the timeline of black people. I want you to focus on before 2,000 years ago. And not just, this king lived at this time or this queen lived at this time. Because remember, I see a lot of you putting up things about, this black king lived, 800 AD. Remember, our timeline does not have after death. That's what that means, after death. Our time does not have before Christ. Our timeline does not have the things that you're going to see in the white timeline that was created by those that were conquering you. Okay, remember, they wiped out or at least attempted to wipe out your timeline and replace it with theirs. So when I see you guys putting up stuff that says AD and BC and all that stuff, it lets me know that you haven't actually studied the black timeline. And so in order for you to start fixing black history so that you can really start teaching black history to black children, I need you to go back and I want you to look at the different people. Make a timeline of the different groups of whites that actually came in and tried to conquer or did conquer black lands. I want you to know who came in first. Try to go back to your black's earliest encounter of white folks. When they first started trying to infiltrate your villages, your tribes, your kingdoms. I want you to go back, and as I told you, today is an extreme pain day. So I'm going to try and get through this quickly to give you guys a start on to begin your research or begin your timeline. But this can't be something that you just put together haphazardly. You need to actually set up a notebook, or get you a couple of notebooks, and starting from whichever day you start, give yourself 365 days to really piece together the timeline of black people. I want you to start collecting some of these pictures. I see you guys are forever putting pictures up and posting pictures and emailing pictures of the pyramids and the different walls and pictures of the pyramids. And that's great. But I want you to start taking those pictures and kind of putting together a collage, if you will. One, so you can see the changes that whites tried to make to those walls, most of which were not successful because they didn't know what materials were used to create the original walls. So anytime that they tried to lighten the people on the wall so that they look less black and more white or light skin or different color hair, those images eventually began to fade because they didn't know what materials that were used originally. And so the original materials would simply begin to show through. I want you to to compare some of the and the different pictures before in 1970. I want you to, you're going to have to go to the library for this. There's a lot of things that were not put on the internet, specifically not put on the internet because they were trying to manipulate and change the images in a timeline. So you're going to have to actually go and do physical research for this. I know a lot of you have never been to the Library of Congress, but a lot of the stuff that was taken by Britain, by Roman Catholics, by all these different people are in the different government libraries. or many of the governments still hold those books and images and writings and all kind of things that were taken over the past 2,000 years. They still have those things. And while they try to destroy a lot of stuff, different groups of whites would come into villages, to tribes, and to kingdoms, and they would try and destroy libraries. That's one of the first things that they try to do is burn libraries. Anytime they're trying to change who the land belongs to and trying to conquer the people, they want to make sure that the first thing that they do is wipe out history. Okay, but a lot of it was saved by groups of black people. There's a lot of different information, and some of it will actually take court orders to get to. But for those of you that just want to start simply, just deal with what you can get to, what you have access to. And a lot of the stuff that you'll have access to is found in reference section of libraries. Those are things from 1900 to 1950, anything before that was during the 1800s. You'll find those in reference libraries. And I want you to start putting together an actual timeline for future generations, so that they don't have to go through the same thing of just haphazardly posting different things and debating on different things. You'll actually set up a timeline, a history lesson, black history for them. And a lot of you already have a lot of the stuff saved. Think of it as a 10,000 piece puzzle. And you're about to try and put this 10,000 piece puzzle together for future generations of black children. Now remember, white folks also have a copy of that 10,000 piece puzzle, and they're not only trying to put those pieces together to find out where you actually came from, but they're also trying to change the things that go against the different fictitious stuff that they have put out there. So when something that they find in these pyramids or digging up places, remember, they're now digging up places that have been buried under sand for thousands of years. So they're finding things each year. They're digging up things that have been buried at sea, underwater, for thousands of years. You guys need to pay attention to this stuff that they're finding. You may not have the resources to go out and search for these things, but as whites are finding these things and bring them up, because remember, once they find them, it takes them about 5 to 10 years before they even let you know that they found it. In that time, they try to find the origins of it. They try to change what goes against their religious stuff they done gave you. There's a lot of different manipulation that goes on before it's even made public that they have it. And so you got to be really, really diligent when it comes to as soon as you find out that they have something, I need you to start getting that information and finding out where it goes in the 10,000 piece timeline. And hopefully at the end of this year, if we're still here, we're going to go through some of the things that you've gotten, some of the pieces that you're missing. And don't feel bad or don't get discouraged if you have a lot of pieces missing. But like I said, they try to hide a lot of stuff. But you have to give yourself 365 days to get this done. And you're just going to go through the different, for those of you that are Pan-Africanists, I want you to go through the timeline. Right now you have the blacks in Africa are going through the 9th slave trade that we know of. You have Chinese that are actually enslaving blacks again and taking over black lands and black resources. Now, how blacks let that happen again is because many of the blacks on the continent do not study their history, just like blacks in the diaspora don't study their history. And so when Chinese came, because they didn't look at history and see what happened to the Asiatic black man and the Asiatic black people, they thought that Chinese were there to help them. Okay? That's the same thing they thought before. So you guys have to understand how the same mistakes keep being made. If you do not study history, then you will make the same mistakes over and over again. That's why this timeline is very important, and it's important for a bunch of black people to do the timeline so that it's not something that can just be seized from one person and destroyed. If a bunch of people are doing the timeline, not only will you have better things to debate about and compare and exchange, but you'll have a bunch of people with a bunch of the pieces that you may not have. And that's the important part. When you find different images of where blacks charted the universe, charted the stars, charted, the different elements and things that they found on the earth. When you're finding these different images, put them in your timeline. Make them one of your pieces and find out where they go in the timeline. And I want you guys, as you're doing these timelines, I want you to think about the Roman numerals. It's very, very important for black advocates to learn, and I don't like to call them Roman numerals, your ancient numerals. It's very important for you to learn your ancient numerals, because as you're doing your timeline, you will find that when you're talking about 1,000,000 years ago, your ancient numerals will come in quite handy for you. Okay? So learn your ancient numerals and use those for your timeline instead of 2000 this and 2000 that and 1999. Those things are important to have on there as far as the timeline of conquerors. But I want you to go, you're going back before the end. So as you're going back even further, for example, if you found a piece of the puzzle that placed the pyramids, they've been buried for, you find something that's 1.7 million years ago, and you have a piece that's from 4 million years ago, and then there's a piece from 7 million years ago, and then you have the dinosaur piece that's allegedly 65 million years ago. That means you can go back quite a ways, okay? So if you went back to the dinosaur era and you started from there, that era forward, figuring out exactly where we, as black people, fit into that timeline, your ancient numerals will come in quite handy for you as far as putting a date on those different pieces. Okay, so that's the history part of the task I want you guys to do. And as you do this each year and do it more and more, you'll learn over 3 years, 5 years, that your pieces will start coming together more and more. You'll start finding other people that are doing the same thing. And not everybody will have the guts to do it, because it will shatter your belief, in a lot of people's belief, in white folk Bibles and white folk religions. Okay, so a lot of people will get extremely defensive as they're finding these pieces, and they'll give up simply because they don't want to give up that book. They don't want to give up that white religion, and that's fine. But for those of you that have the guts to do the test and continue with it, that's the real history lesson, or the real history task that I want you to engage in, to start putting together for the next generations. Because I want you guys to stop seeing the black generation as just, your children and grandchildren. I want you to start seeing the next 10 black generations. As black advocates, you should be working on the things every time you get up, every day that you get up and start working on fixing things in the black community. You should be focusing on fixing things so that they are fixed for the next 10 generations of black people. If you had to fix a situation for the next 10 generations of black children, then you wouldn't focus just on 100 black children on a program and think you're doing something. Doing a program for 100 black children is great, but doing a program and structuring it so that it affects not only those 100 children, but the next 10 generations of black children, you'll see your progress expand extremely quickly. You'll see things in a whole different light. And when you see us as Panthers, and we seem to be seeing things differently than other black folks do, that is because we do focus on the next, fixing things for the next 10 generations, the next 20 generations, the next 100 generations. So a lot of black folks don't even count when they're doing, setting up these 501c3s and different programs. They don't even count how these programs will affect 100 generations from now. That's not even factored into their business plan, if you will. But that's what's needed in order to fix these things. And if you had, I see a lot of you trying to work on redoing Black Wall Street, it's important that you go through the history of, it's great to talk about, that there was a Black Wall Street. It's great to talk about that there were many Black Wall Streets. But I want you to go through the timeline. Now I want you to look at some of these black towns and black areas and cities that were set up, and start from the beginning. When did they first start setting up Black Wall Street? What was the catalyst? What was the event that started it? What was the first thing that they built? When you're trying to redo the black community, you need to go by steps. And those steps, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already been done. All you have to do is really go back and find out what was the first thing they did. Okay? Was the first thing they built, was that a school? when you looking and you say that, well, the first thing they built was a school. Well, I need you to go back further than that. Where'd they get the land? Where'd the land come from? Because it's great to build a school, but whose land is it? Did the land belong to them? Okay, did they get the land from former slave owners? What, was it the land payment for did they get their reparations? There are some things that you have in your history, in your timeline, that are holes, that are missing. And that is why you guys spend 86% of your time debating each other over the silliest things. I mean, really ridiculous. And nothing gets done. History is the only thing that gives you a measuring stick to know how much progress you've made, whether or not you're on track, and what else has to be done for future generations. Okay, so I'm going to lay myself down. I was going to try and venture out today, but the pain is hitting kind of hard. I may still try to venture out. I gotta get used to it at some point. But I'm going to lay myself down for a little while and then see what happens. But I hope that gives you guys another task that helps in your fixing the situation that you're facing in the Black community. Okay, so y'all know how we do. And if we're still here next time, we're going to deal with some things. Okay?